My name is Isabel Rossi, and at 35 years old, I never expected my 16-year-old daughter to save me from my own family. That warm September evening, at my parents' 45th anniversary celebration, should have been a portrait of familial harmony. The Evergreen Hills Golf and Country Club was bathed in the soft glow of twilight filtering through tall fir trees, champagne glasses chimed a delicate melody, and the smiles, for the most part, seemed genuine. But throughout the meticulously planned dinner, I watched my daughter, Maya, grow increasingly still, a quiet tension tightening her shoulders. Her gaze, usually so full of soft curiosity, darted between her grandparents and my ex-husband, a shadow of deep concern in her gray eyes. When a waiter presented the magnificent tiered anniversary cake, she suddenly placed a firm hand on my arm. "Mom," she whispered, her voice a low, urgent hum beneath the cheerful chatter. "We need to go. Right now." I stared at her, my mind a whirl of confusion. "What?" "Why, honey?" "The cake." Her eyes, so much like my own but holding a clarity I'd long since lost, hardened with a resolve that startled me. "I'll tell you in the car." My relationship with my parents, Richard and Catherine Sterling, had always felt like navigating a beautiful but treacherous shoreline. Growing up in their sprawling, architect-designed home in Cedaridge, Washington, meant living under the weight of high expectations and the shadow of conditional approval. My father had built his architectural firm, Sterling and Sons, from a single drafting table into a regional powerhouse, and my mother curated their social standing with the precision of a museum director. Love was a dividend paid on achievements. Disappointments were debts held indefinitely. I thought I had finally secured my place in their good graces when I married Ethan Hayes, the son of one of my father's oldest business partners. My parents had been captivated by Ethan from the start, his Wharton MBA, his effortless charm at their fundraising galas, his ambition that mirrored my father's. For 12 years, I convinced myself we had a solid, respectable marriage, even as Ethan's presence in our home grew more ghostly and his critiques of my choices more frequent. When I discovered Ethan's long-standing affair with Chloe, a junior analyst at his firm, my carefully constructed world didn't just implode, it quietly dissolved, leaving me adrift. The divorce was a bitter, methodical affair that left me financially and emotionally depleted, with 2 children to anchor me to a new, uncertain reality: Maya, my perceptive, strong-willed daughter, and Nico, my sweet, sensitive 9-year-old son. I had to leave our spacious modern home overlooking the Sound and move into a modest 3-bedroom rental in a less fashionable part of town. I pieced together a living from my small landscape design business, work I was passionate about but which my father had always dismissed as a gardening hobby. To my profound relief, my parents seemed to rally around me during the divorce. The phone calls became more frequent, lavish gifts arrived for the children, and Sunday dinners at their home became a standing invitation. I clung to their gestures like a lifeline, grateful and believing they had finally, unequivocally, chosen me. Only Maya remained unconvinced. "They look at you differently now, Mom," she'd observed one evening, watching me arrange a bouquet of flowers my mother had sent. "Like you're a problem they have to solve." I'd brushed off her observation as the hypersensitivity of a teenager navigating a difficult time. "They're just trying to help, sweetie. It's their way of showing they care." Maya had just shrugged, her silence more potent than any argument. Over the following months, a quiet rift grew between her and her grandparents. She started finding excuses to miss Sunday dinners, a study group, a shift at the bookstore. When her attendance was non-negotiable, she was a model of politeness, but her participation was muted. She observed, her gaze missing nothing. Nico, however, flourished under their focused attention. They took him to Mariners games, bought him a state-of-the-art telescope I couldn't afford, and took him on tours of my father's construction sites. My father began speaking of Nico attending his alma mater, of him showing an aptitude for structure and design. "The Sterling legacy continues," he would boom, ruffling Nico's hair, his eyes sliding past me as if I were a ghost in the room. When my parents announced their 45th anniversary celebration, I saw it as a grand opportunity for healing. An elegant affair at Evergreen Hills, with a guest list that was a veritable who's who of Setteridge society. It was a chance to stand beside them as a family, to show everyone, and perhaps myself, that we were still whole. I poured weeks of effort into the preparations. I couldn't afford a new dress, so I carefully altered a deep blue silk gown from a happier time in my life. I helped my mother cross-reference invitation lists and debate menu choices. I even spent hours creating a digital slideshow, a tribute to their 4.5 decades together, carefully selecting images that told a story of enduring love. Maya watched my flurry of activity with a quiet concern. "Why are you trying so hard, Mom? They never meet you halfway." "Because that's what family does," I replied, the words a mantra I desperately wanted to believe. "We show up for each other." The day of the party arrived, a perfect, crisp Pacific Northwest evening. I spent an hour coaxing Maya into the sage green dress my mother had insisted on buying for her. "Just for a few hours," I'd pleaded. "It will make Grandma so happy." When we arrived at the country club, the sheer elegance of the scene momentarily took my breath away. Arrangements of white orchids and eucalyptus graced every table. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, forgiving light over the polished dance floor. A string quartet played softly in a corner. My parents stood near the grand entrance, my father looking regal in his tuxedo, my mother resplendent in a gown of shimmering pewter beads, greeting their guests like visiting dignitaries. "Isabel, darling," my mother said, her lips brushing the air near my cheek. "That dress is comfortable. And Maya, don't you look lovely?" I knew that shade of green would complement your eyes. My father's gaze barely registered me before he enveloped Nico in a hug. "There's my champion. I've got a special seat for you, right next to me at the head table." I felt the first, faint prickle of unease, but smoothed it over with a practiced smile. This was their night. The ballroom quickly filled with a sea of familiar and unfamiliar faces. I drifted through the crowd, playing the part of the devoted daughter, accepting quiet condolences about my divorce with a polished grace. Yes, it's been a challenge, but the children are so resilient. No, not dating anyone. Just focusing on my work and the kids. Everything seemed to be flowing smoothly until I saw them standing at the entrance. Ethan, looking confident and prosperous in a bespoke suit, with Chloe on his arm. Her auburn hair was styled in a sleek chignon, accentuating a diamond necklace that glittered with a fire I knew I could never afford. My stomach twisted into a cold knot. "Did you know they were coming?" I whispered to my sister-in-law, Laura. She had the decency to look uncomfortable. I assumed you knew. Your mother sent them a personal invitation." Before I could absorb the blow, my parents were enveloping Ethan and Chloe in enthusiastic hugs. My father clapped Ethan on the back as if he were a prodigal son returned, while my mother openly admired Chloe's necklace. I stood frozen, a spectator at the warm reunion of my family with the man who had shattered my life and the woman who had helped him. When I finally caught my mother's eye from across the room, she gave a tiny, dismissive shrug. "Bygones, darling," the gesture seemed to say. "Ethan is practically family. We couldn't possibly exclude him from such an important night." As I retreated to the bar for a much-needed glass of wine, I saw Maya standing near a potted ficus, her back to the room, watching everything with narrowed eyes while she texted furiously on her phone. I should have paid more attention. I should have asked who she was messaging with such intensity. Instead, I took another sip of Chardonnay and told myself to just get through the evening with my dignity intact. The ballroom at Evergreen Hills hummed with the practiced ease of old money and established connections. Crystal clinked, servers in crisp white jackets moved like phantoms with trays of Dungeness crab cakes, and the official photographer captured one carefully curated moment of joy after another. I held my smile in place, a fragile mask over the growing ache in my chest. It was one thing to be civil, it was another to watch Ethan and Chloe be fate, accepting congratulations from my parents' friends on their recent engagement. "You're handling this with so much grace," my cousin, Sophia, whispered, squeezing my arm. I'd have launched my wine glass at her head by now. "Trying to take the high road," I murmured, my eyes scanning the room for my children. Nico was easy to find, a small, proud shadow at my father's side as he introduced him to a series of powerful-looking men. "This is my grandson, Nico," I heard my father say, his hand resting possessively on Nico's shoulder. The future of Sterling and Sons. Maya was more difficult to locate. I finally spotted her in a quiet alcove, deep in what looked like an intense conversation with my mother's sister, Aunt Susan. Maya's posture was rigid, her expression grave as she listened to Susan, who kept glancing nervously over her shoulder. When they saw me approaching, the conversation stopped with a jolt. "Everything all right over here?" I asked, trying for a light tone. "Just catching up with my brilliant grandniece," Susan said with a strained brightness. "She's become such a perceptive young woman." Maya's eyes met mine for a brief, loaded moment. "We were just talking about family history," she said, her tone flat. Before I could inquire further, the gentle chime of a glass being tapped drew everyone's attention. My father stood at the center of the room, effortlessly commanding the space. "Catherine and I are so deeply touched by your presence here tonight," he began, raising his glass to my mother. "45 years ago, I made the best acquisition of my life." Polite, appreciative laughter rippled through the crowd. "A marriage, like a great building, is about creating something that lasts," he continued. "It's about making difficult, pragmatic decisions for the good of the entire structure. Sometimes, that means reinforcing the foundation for the future, even if it causes some temporary, localized disruption." His eyes drifted from Ethan to Nico and then, for a fleeting second, to me, with an expression I couldn't decipher. "So tonight, we celebrate not just the past, but the work we are doing to secure the future. To legacy and to wise investments." The guests raised their glasses, though I saw a few exchange puzzled looks at the businesslike nature of the toast. As dinner was served, I tried to enjoy the seared halibut, but my unease was a bitter herb on my tongue. Maya had barely touched her food, her phone resting in her lap, her thumb periodically swiping at the screen. Nico, meanwhile, had been seated between my father and Ethan. The two men were locked in an animated discussion, their heads close together, their voices dropping to a murmur whenever a server approached. During the dessert course, I excused myself to the ladies' lounge and nearly collided with Aunt Susan in the hallway. "Oh, Isabel," she startled. "I was hoping to catch you alone for a moment. Is everything okay? You seemed so serious with Maya earlier." Susan wrung her hands, her gaze darting down the hall. I'm concerned, dear. I overheard some things earlier. Your father and Ethan, they were discussing financial matters that seem unusual for a party." "What kind of matters?" "Something about transferring assets to protect against liabilities. They mentioned your name and the lake house. And they used words like unreliable and sentimental." Susan squeezed my hand, her own hand trembling slightly. "I know Richard can be overbearing, but this feels different. Just be careful." Before I could ask for more, my mother appeared at the end of the hall. "There you are, Susan. The photographer wants a picture of the sisters. Now." With an apologetic glance, Susan hurried away, leaving me enveloped in a cold fog of dread. When I returned to our table, Maya was gone. Nico was now sitting on Ethan's lap, the two of them looking at something on Ethan's phone and laughing. My mother stood nearby, beaming at them with a look of proprietary pride she so rarely directed at me. "Where's Maya?" I asked, scanning the room. "That girl," my mother sighed, a familiar note of exasperation in her voice. "So moody." She said something about getting some air on the terrace. I found Maya outside, her back to the party, her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, that's exactly what the document said," she was saying, her voice low and tense. "I need to know if that's even legal." She saw me and quickly ended the call. "Mom, how was the party?" she asked, her casual tone completely at odds with the conversation I'd just overheard. "Who were you talking to?" "Just a friend from school," she said, tucking the phone into her purse. She looked past me, into the glittering ballroom. "Have you noticed how much time Grandpa is spending with Ethan?" "It's probably just business, honey," I said, though the words tasted like a lie. Maya's gaze returned to my face, her expression unreadable. Mom, have you ever wondered why Grandpa keeps all those important family documents in his study at home? The deeds, the trust paperwork, everything. What are you talking about? How would you even know what's in his study? She hesitated. A few weeks ago, when we were over for dinner, I needed a quiet place to read for school. Grandma said I could use Grandpa's study since he was out. There were papers on his desk. Papers with your name on them and Ethan's. There were sticky notes, Mom. Red ones. Marking paragraphs about asset transfers and custody. A chill traced its way down my spine despite the mild evening air. Maya, those are private. You shouldn't have been looking at them. Her face clouded with frustration. So you're more worried that I saw them than about what was on them? Before I could form a response, the doors to the terrace swung open as servers began arranging tables for the cake cutting. Maya gave me a long, searching look. Just watch them, okay? Please. Especially how they act around Ethan. For the next hour, I did exactly that. I watched with a new, horrifying clarity. My father's hand on Ethan's shoulder, guiding him toward a state senator. My mother showing Chloe a sapphire ring on her finger, the very ring that had been promised to me. Ethan's easy, entitled comfort in my parents' inner circle, as if the divorce had been a minor inconvenience, now resolved. But the most disturbing part was the photography. They were constantly positioning Nico between them. Richard, Ethan, and Nico. A new trinity. I was asked to step out of one shot to get a better angle. It was a visual representation of their plan, a careful, systematic erasure of me and Maya from the official family portrait. The slideshow I had so painstakingly created began, projected onto a large screen. 45 Years of Love and Legacy, the title slide read. As the images flowed by, a nauseating pattern emerged. My brother and his family were featured heavily. Ethan appeared in numerous family photos, even recent ones. Nico was a star. But I was a footnote, and Maya was practically a ghost, appearing in only 2 large group shots from years ago. I glanced at Maya. She wasn't watching the screen, she was watching me, gauging my reaction. She had seen this coming long before I had. When the presentation ended to a round of applause, my father took the microphone again. Before we cut this magnificent cake, Catherine and I have one more announcement. He gestured for Ethan and Nico to join him at the front of the room. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. Family continuity, my father declared, his voice resonating with purpose, has always been our highest priority. And tonight, we are taking a significant step to ensure that the sterling traditions and properties remain in capable hands for the generations to come. I felt Maya's hand slip into mine, her grip surprisingly strong. In the coming weeks, my father continued, his eyes meeting mine with a flicker of what looked like pity, we will be finalizing legal arrangements to secure our family's legacy through the most pragmatic channels. Sometimes, the most loving thing a parent can do is to make the difficult decisions for those who cannot see what is best for themselves. A confused murmur rippled through the guests. And then Maya stood up. I need to go check on something, she whispered, and before I could stop her, she slipped out of the ballroom. For the next 20 minutes, I sat in a state of suspended animation, mechanically smiling and nodding as guests stopped by the table. When Maya finally returned, her face was ashen, her expression a mask of grim determination. She leaned in close, her voice a barely audible tremor in my ear. Mom, we need to leave. Now. We can't just walk out, I whispered back, acutely aware of the people at the next table. It's my parents' anniversary. Nico is having a wonderful time. Maya's eyes flashed with an intensity one had never seen before. Mom, trust me. We have to go. Did something happen? Are you sick? I will explain everything. But not here. She glanced nervously toward my father's lawyer, Lawrence Price, who was watching our tense exchange with detached interest. Please, Mom. For once in your life, just trust me without asking a million questions. The raw desperation in her voice finally broke through my denial. Maya was thoughtful and perceptive, but she was never dramatic. If she was this insistent, something was terribly wrong. All right, I conceded. Let me just say a proper goodbye and get Nico. Be quick, she urged. And don't let Grandpa talk you out of it. I navigated the tables toward Nico, conscious of the curious glances following me. My mother intercepted me halfway. Leaving so soon? Her perfectly lipsticked mouth curved into a smile that was all sharp angles. The evening is just getting interesting, Isabel. Maya isn't feeling well, I lied. I need to get her home. Oh, for heaven's sake. Send her with your brother. Mark can drop her off. You and Nico need to stay for the important announcements. A chill went through me at her insistence. What announcements? Just some family business matters. Nothing for you to concern yourself with. She patted my arm, her touch a condescending dismissal. Your father has it all under control. That's what I'm afraid of, I said, moving past her to collect Nico. He protested leaving the party, whining that Grandpa had promised him a special surprise later. We'll come back for the surprise another day, I promised, deliberately avoiding my father's questioning stare from across the room. Ethan materialized at my side, blocking our path to the exit. Heading out? The night's still young, Isabel. The scent of his expensive cologne, once so familiar, now felt like a violation. Your father was hoping to discuss the arrangements for Nico's educational trust. Another time, I said firmly, noting how he'd specified Nico, not the children. Don't be difficult, he said, his voice dropping. This is important. Your parents are trying to secure Nico's future, since you're obviously struggling. His eyes swept over my altered dress, a flicker of contempt in his gaze. Maya stepped between us, her small frame radiating an unexpected authority. We're leaving. Now. She looked at her brother. Nico, take Mom's hand. As we made our hasty exit, I caught snippets of conversation from a group of my father's associates near the door. Transfer of the lake property should be straightforward once the custody modification is filed. Richard wants to keep it in the family, just not through the daughter. Ethan's name on the trust by the end of the month. My father caught up to us at the main entrance, his face a practiced mask of concern and disappointment. Isabel, this is highly inappropriate. We have guests. We have announcements to make. I'm sorry, Dad, but Maya isn't well. He barely glanced at her. Then leave her with the valet. You and Nico need to be here for the family business portion of the evening. The possessive way he said family business, as if it were an exclusive club from which Maya and I were barred, sent a final, blaring alarm through my system. For the first time in my life, I did not bend to his will. Whatever it is, it can wait. We're leaving. His expression hardened. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior that worries us. Ethan would never put his personal feelings above family obligations. Ethan put his personal feelings into his 26-year-old analyst, I retorted, the sharp words tasting like freedom. And yet somehow, he's still the golden child. My father leaned in, his voice a low threat. We are trying to protect the family assets from your emotional decisions. If you would stop being so difficult and accept the arrangement, this could be painless. What arrangement? I demanded. He straightened, recomposing his features as another guest passed by. We'll discuss this when you're being more reasonable. Ethan and I have plans that benefit everyone. Especially Nico. Maya tugged at my sleeve. Mom. Now. Please. I looked from my father's cold, resolute face to my daughter's, which was filled with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. Whatever she had found, it was real. And it was happening now. I gave a single, decisive nod. I turned my back on my father without another word and guided my children through the ornate glass doors of the country club, out into the cool, dark embrace of the night. As we walked toward the car, a strange calm settled over me. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong in my family, and for the first time, I felt ready to find out what it was. The interior of my sensible Subaru felt like a sanctuary as we pulled out of the country club's winding driveway. A heavy silence filled the car, punctuated only by Nico's soft sighs from the back seat as he fiddled with a small, silver-wrapped party favor. Maya sat beside me, her posture as straight and rigid as a soldier's, her hands clenched in her lap as she stared at the ribbon of road unwinding before us. Are you going to tell me what that was all about? I finally asked, my voice low so as not to alarm Nico. Maya glanced into the rearview mirror. Not yet. He doesn't need to hear this. I nodded, respecting her wisdom. We drove in a tense quiet for 15 minutes, the city lights blurring past my window. Soon, Nico's head began to nod, the excitement of the evening finally surrendering to exhaustion. Once his soft, even breathing filled the back seat, Maya straightened. "Pull over somewhere," she said. "A park or an empty lot. I need to show you something." I found a deserted corner of a shopping center parking lot, the stores dark, the vast space lit by the lonely yellow glare of a few security lights. I shifted the car into park and killed the engine. The sudden silence was absolute. The soft glow of the dashboard lights illuminated Maya's face as she unlocked her phone. "I've known something was wrong for months," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "The way Grandpa and Grandma talk about you when they think I can't hear. How they've been. I don't know, grooming Nico. And ignoring me." She took a shaky breath. "I thought maybe I was just being a paranoid teenager. Until tonight." She opened her text messages. "First, I have to tell you who I've been talking to. It's Great Aunt Diana." The name landed like a stone in the quiet car. Diana was my father's younger sister, a vibrant, artistic woman who had been effectively exiled from the family nearly 20 years ago after a bitter fight over their parents' estate. My father had always painted her as unstable, greedy, and ungrateful. We hadn't spoken to her since I was in high school. How did you even find her?" "Instagram," Maya said simply. "I looked her up 3 months ago." I reached out because she hesitated, searching for the words, because the way Grandpa treats you reminded me of the things Grandma used to say about her. She handed me the phone. I scrolled through a long, detailed text exchange. My heart sank as I read Diana's cautious, then urgent, warnings. "Watch for them trying to control your finances. Watch for them getting overly involved with custody. Richard's favorite tactic is to isolate and then ambush." And Maya's responses, full of growing dread. "He's doing it again, isn't he? He's doing it to Mom." "That's why I've been watching so closely," Maya said, her voice trembling. But tonight, it all became real. When I left the ballroom, I didn't just get air. I went to the club's library. I overheard Grandpa and Ethan in there earlier, talking about documents in his briefcase. "Maya, you can't just go through someone's private things," even as I said it. A wave of fierce pride washed over me, silencing my protest. "Mom, they're planning to take everything from you." Her eyes welled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. I listened outside the door. They were laughing. Laughing about how you'd never suspect a thing until it was too late. That's when I knew I had to look. She took her phone back and swiped to her photo gallery. I took pictures. Of everything. What I saw made my blood run cold. Crisp, clear photos of legal documents. A quitclaim deed, transferring ownership of the Whispering Pines Lake Cabin, our family's soul, the place of my most cherished childhood memories, from my parents' trust into Ethan's name, to be held in trust for Nico Sterling Hayes. A draft of a custody modification petition, full of legalese, with notes scribbled in my father's sharp, definitive handwriting in the margins, cite financial instability, unconventional work schedule, failure to uphold family tradition. "There's more," Maya said, her voice flat. When I went back into the party, I put my phone in my purse on the table and started a voice memo. She played the recording. The sound was muffled, layered with the distant clink of glasses, but my father's voice was unmistakable. "This way, the lake house is protected from her poor decisions and potential creditors. Ethan understands its long-term value." Then, my mother's voice, smoother, more silken. "We've always worried about her judgment, Richard. Remember that dreadful poet she dated in college? Or that year she wanted to move to Italy? Thank goodness you've stayed so close to us, Ethan. Despite everything, you're the son we always wanted." Tears I hadn't realized I was holding back began to blur my vision. The recording continued, a litany of their plans. Challenging our divorce settlement. Building a case for primary custody of Nico based on a financial instability they were actively trying to engineer. And the most chilling part, their casual, calculated dismissal of Maya, whom they deemed too much like her mother. "They've been saying things to Nico, too," Maya added softly. "Little things. When you're not there. Grandma told him that if he lived with Dad and her, he could go to a private academy and have a horse. That you were holding him back from his potential. The betrayal was a physical pain, so vast and deep I could hardly breathe. My own parents. Conspiring with the man who betrayed me. To take my son. To steal my inheritance. And using their anniversary, a celebration of their own union, as the stage for my dispossession. I couldn't let you stay in there, Mom, Maya explained, her hand finding mine in the dark. I couldn't let them make that announcement and watch you fall apart in front of all those people. Aunt Diana said that's what Grandpa did to her. Blindsided her at a family Christmas party so she couldn't fight back without looking hysterical. I gripped her hand, my anchor in a world that had just tilted off its axis. Thank you, I whispered, my voice choked. Thank you for seeing what I refused to see. For being brave enough to find the truth. For getting us out of there. She squeezed back. I was so scared you wouldn't believe me. You always try to see the best in them. I believe you now, I said. I turned the key, and the engine hummed back to life. Let's go home. And figure out what we do tomorrow. As we drove through the dark, quiet streets toward our small, safe rental house, I knew two things with a terrible, crystalline certainty. My daughter had just saved me from a lifetime of my own blind devotion. And a war I had never wanted was about to begin. Sleep was a distant country I couldn't reach. After settling a drowsy Nico into bed, I spent the night at my small kitchen table, a sentry under the dim track lighting. With Maya asleep on the sofa, a testament to the day's emotional toll, I sat with my laptop, her phone, and a growing sense of cold resolve. The initial shock was hardening into something else, a quiet, focused anger. My own investigation began. I logged into an old, shared email account from my marriage, one Ethan had likely forgotten existed. He had always used the drafts folder as a personal diary. The evidence was there, stark and clinical. RS agrees transfer of lake property must be finalized before year-end for tax purposes. Custody mod to follow. I is distracted by new business ventures, unlikely to scrutinize legal notices. Another draft, dated 3 days before the party. Anniversary is perfect cover to announce new structure. K, concerned about S reaction, but RS confident family pressure will ensure compliance. My hands trembled as I dug deeper. In his sent items, I found emails to his own lawyer, a man who played golf with my father, inquiring about the legal precedents for modifying custody based on disparities in financial stability and familial support systems. At 2 a.m, fueled by coffee and a righteous fury, I did what I hadn't done in nearly 20 years. I found my Aunt Diana's professional website, a successful interior design firm based in Santa Fe. Her contact information was listed. Without allowing myself a moment of doubt, I sent a text. Diana, this is Isabel. Maya showed me everything. I need to talk to you about Dad. An immediate reply pinged back. I've been waiting for this text for years. Are you somewhere you can talk freely? We spoke for over an hour. Her voice, which I barely remembered, was warm and steady as she recounted her own story. How our father had systematically undermined her, manipulated her out of her share of our grandparents' estate, and used a family holiday to publicly cast her as the villain when she dared to object. It's his playbook, Isabel, she said, her voice thick with a sorrow that time had not fully healed. He sees the family as a corporation and his children as assets on a balance sheet. When I chose a life he didn't approve of, marrying an artist, moving away, I became a non-performing asset. A liability to be managed. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked, my voice small. Oh, honey, I tried. But you were 18, you worshipped him. You were planning your life with Ethan, his hand-picked successor. You didn't want to hear it. The truth of her words was a fresh wound. I had dismissed Diana's warnings, relayed through my mother, as the bitter ramblings of a jealous sister. I had chosen my father's narrative without question. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I should have listened. What matters is you're listening now, she replied firmly. And that you have Maya. That girl is a miracle. When she first contacted me, I heard myself at her age, before I let him break my spirit. Before we hung up, she gave me practical advice. Document everything, never confront them alone, and don't sign a single thing, along with the name of her own attorney. She's a shark, Isabel. And she hates bullies. At dawn, I called my older brother, Mark, an architect who lived in Chicago and had always maintained a careful, strategic distance from our family's core. He listened, his silence heavy with reluctance. I heard Dad and Ethan talking about the lake house, he finally admitted. I didn't know the full extent. Dad framed it as an estate planning move for tax purposes. He said it would benefit all of us in the long run. Including me? I asked, the bitterness sharp in my throat. His silence was its own confession. Why, Mark? Why would he do this? He sighed, a sound of weary resignation. Dad never really forgave you for walking away from the life he planned for you. The landscape design thing, the divorce, in his mind, you rejected the entire Sterling framework. Ethan promised to keep the assets, the legacy, tied to the family name through Nico. And Maya? She's too much like you, Isabel. Independent. Observant. He trailed off. Before I learned to keep my head down and go along to get along, I finished for him. I'm sorry, Isabel, he said, and for the first time, he sounded genuinely remorseful. I should have warned you. After seeing Nico off to school, I sat down with Maya beside me for moral support and dialed my parents' number. My mother answered, her voice as crisp and cool as a starched linen napkin. Isabel, your behavior last night was an absolute disgrace. Your father is profoundly disappointed. I'd like to speak with him as well. Please, I said, my voice steady. I want you both on the line. A moment later, my father's authoritative tone joined hers. I trust you are calling to apologize for that embarrassing spectacle. Actually, I'm calling about the legal documents you and Ethan have been preparing. The transfer of the lake house. The custody petitions. The trust modifications. The silence on the other end was a confession. Those are private family matters, my father finally said, his tone hardening. Matters that wouldn't need to exist if you had demonstrated better judgment. They concern me directly as they involve my children and my inheritance. An inheritance is a privilege, not a right, my mother interjected. Your father built this family from nothing. He has the wisdom to decide how to best protect its future. By giving my property to my cheating ex-husband? By helping him take my son from me? Don't be so dramatic, my father snapped. We are simply ensuring the family assets are properly managed. Your financial situation since the divorce has been alarming. You mean my decision to not let Ethan control every penny? Or my refusal to give up my career to be a full-time hostess for his clients? We have always supported your little gardening hobby, my mother said, her condescension a familiar sting. Ethan understands business, my father continued, his voice rising. He knows how to grow wealth. Nico deserves the opportunities that come with that. And Maya? I challenged. What opportunities have you planned for her? Their silence was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Maya is headstrong, my mother finally offered. Like Diana was. She doesn't seem to have an appreciation for family tradition. The casual, cold-blooded dismissal of my daughter lit a fire in me that burned away the last vestiges of fear. Let me be perfectly clear, I said, my voice as calm and unyielding as stone. I know everything. I have copies of the documents. I have recordings of your conversations. And I have witnesses to your attempts to manipulate my son. You're being hysterical, my father boomed. This is precisely why these measures were necessary. Your emotional instability. Is this how you justified what you did to Aunt Diana, too? I cut in. The shocked silence told me I had hit the mark. I have spoken with Diana, I continued. And with Mark. I know this isn't the first time you have used your power to disinherit a family member who wouldn't fall in line. You've been speaking with that ungrateful woman, my mother gasped, her voice shrill with indignation. That's enough, I said. I am meeting with an attorney this afternoon. Any further communication will go through her. Tell Ethan the same. You are making a monumental mistake, Isabel, my father warned. We were trying to help you. No, Dad, I said, and the clarity was breathtaking. You were trying to control me. As you always have. But it stops now. I ended the call and sat in the quiet of my kitchen, the morning sun streaming through the window. Maya's eyes were wide, shining with a mixture of fear and awe. "What happens now?" she asked. I pulled her into a hug, drawing on her strength. "Now," I said, holding my daughter tight, "we fight." The next morning, I walked into the downtown office of Rebecca Shaw, the attorney Diana had recommended. Her office wasn't the opulent, wood-paneled suite I was used to from my father's world. It was a bright, modern space with abstract art on the walls and a view of the bustling city. Rebecca herself was sharp, focused, and utterly unimpressed by the sterling name. Patriarchal overreach with a side of financial coercion, she summarized crisply after I had laid out the story, supported by Maya's folders of evidence. "Your situation, Ms. Rossi, is depressingly common. The good news is, your daughter has handed us a case on a silver platter." "What about the custody threat?" I asked, the fear a constant, low hum beneath my anger. "Ethan has my father's money behind him." "Money is a factor, but it's not a silver bullet," Rebecca said, tapping a finger on the printouts of Maya's photos. "Courts prioritize the child's best interest and established bonds. Their documented plan to use your son as a pawn in a property dispute is not going to play well before a judge." She outlined a two-pronged strategy. First, file an immediate injunction to block any and all transfers of property from my parents' trust. Second, compile a formal record of their attempts at parental alienation. "We also need to address Nico," she advised gently. "They've been working on him. He needs a safe space to process this." Maya, who had insisted on being at the meeting, spoke up. "Nico's just confused. He loves Mom, but Grandpa's been filling his head with stories about private school and a pony if he lives with Dad." Rebecca nodded. "Children are perceptive, but they're also vulnerable. Family therapy could be very helpful. It would give him a neutral party to talk to, and it would also demonstrate to the court that you are proactively addressing your son's emotional well-being." After establishing our legal firewall, I took the next difficult step. On Rebecca's advice, I asked Ethan to meet me at a neutral coffee shop, a place with no history for us. I placed my phone on the table between us, the screen dark but its presence a clear statement. "This is getting out of hand, Isabel," he began, his usual easy confidence replaced by a twitchy agitation. "It got out of hand when you conspired with my parents to take my home and my son," I replied, my voice even and calm, just as Rebecca had coached. He tried to deny it at first, falling back on excuses about misunderstanding and good intentions. But when I referenced specific dates from his emails and quotes from the recordings, his story began to crumble. "Your parents approached me," he finally admitted, his gaze dropping to his coffee cup. "They were concerned about your emotional state. They were worried about the kid's stability. And their solution was to make you the steward of my inheritance and the primary parent to my son?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "Richard believes family assets need to be managed by someone with a certain acumen. The lake house, the trust, he sees them as sterling legacies. Legacies I am apparently unfit to steward because I had the audacity to divorce you after you cheated on me." He leaned forward, the old persuasive charm flickering in his eyes. "Be reasonable, Isabel. Your father is offering long-term financial security for Nico. All you have to do is cooperate." "And what's in the arrangement for Maya?" I asked, already knowing the answer. His hesitation was a confirmation. "Maya is different. More independent. Richard feels that she's too much like me. I finished for him. Not pliable enough." Our meeting ended with Ethan finally understanding that I would not be intimidated or cajoled. As he stood to leave, he delivered one last, parting shot. "You can't win this, Isabel. Your father has more resources and more influence than you can possibly imagine. Don't start a war you're destined to lose." A month ago, his words would have sent me into a spiral of panic. But something had shifted deep inside me. Maya's courage had lit a pilot light of my own. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal strategy and emotional repair. Rebecca filed the injunctions. I found a wonderful family therapist and began taking both children. In that quiet, safe room, Nico's confusion and anxiety began to surface. "Grandpa said Dad needs me more now because he's building a new family," he confessed in one session, his small face etched with a burden no 9-year-old should carry. He said I'm the sterling heir. You are my son first and foremost, I told him, my hand on his back. And you never have to choose between the people who love you. Maya, free from the weight of her secrets, began to thrive. She reconnected with Aunt Diana, finding a mentor and a friend in the great-aunt she'd only just discovered. They spoke for hours on FaceTime, Diana sharing stories of the family I'd never known and coaching Maya on how to stay strong. Diana flew out to visit us, her presence a warm, grounding force in our small home. After 20 years, we sat at my kitchen table and rebuilt the bridge my father had dynamited. He uses the same playbook every single time, she said, her eyes sad but clear. He identifies the family member who questions him, paints them as unstable or selfish, isolates them from potential allies, and then stages a public ambush. It's all about control. I can't believe I never saw it, I lamented. Because he's smart, she said, squeezing my hand. He only ever targets one person at a time. Everyone else keeps their head down, just grateful it isn't them. She smiled. But he miscalculated with you, Isabel. He didn't factor in Maya. Indeed, Maya was my chief strategist. While I dealt with the emotional fallout, she kept meticulous notes, creating a timeline of her grandparents' actions and helping me explain things to Nico in ways he could understand. It's like when you and your friends make rules for a video game so no one can cheat, I overheard her telling him. Mom is just making sure everyone plays by the rules. Even my brother Mark eventually came through, forwarding me emails from my father that further documented the coordinated plan, providing crucial corroboration for our case. The most painful part of the process was the slow, dawning acceptance that the relationship I'd had with my parents was an illusion. For my entire life, I had contorted myself to earn their love, mistaking their control for care. Now I saw their affection for what it was, a conditional commodity, available only as long as I adhered to their blueprint for my life. 3 months after the anniversary party, Rebecca called with news. Ethan wants to meet. Without his lawyer, and without your parents. Why? He's feeling the pressure, she explained. Our injunctions have stalled all of his plans. And apparently, his fiancée is getting cold feet about marrying into a family in the middle of such a nasty, public feud. I agreed to meet him. This time, he looked tired and defeated. This has to stop, Isabel, he said. The lawyers, the court filings, it's affecting Nico. It's affecting my wedding. You mean it's affecting your image, I said, my voice neutral. I'm willing to withdraw my name from all of your father's property transfers, he offered. And I will agree, in writing, to adhere to our original custody agreement. In return, I want you to drop the formal complaint of parental alienation. I studied him, the man who had been my husband, now just a stranger willing to use his own son as a bargaining chip. Why the sudden change of heart? He glanced away. Chloe's parents are traditional. They're concerned about the family dynamics. In other words, his new in-laws had standards his behavior failed to meet. I'll consider it, I said. But I want everything in writing. And any agreement must include permanent, legally binding protections for both of my children's future inheritance rights. As we negotiated, I felt a fundamental shift. I was no longer the accommodating wife, but an equal, calmly and firmly stating my non-negotiable terms. The power dynamic had been irrevocably altered. A week later, in our therapist's office, Ethan and I sat with Nico and explained that we had worked out our disagreements. Does this mean Grandpa won't be mad at Mom anymore? Nico asked, his innocent question revealing just how much he had absorbed. Grandpa and I have some different opinions, I explained carefully. But that never changes how much we all love you. It was a simplified truth, but it was the truth a 9-year-old needed. The full reckoning with my parents was yet to come. 6 months after that fateful anniversary party, we all gathered in the sterile, beige conference room of Rebecca Shaw's law firm. The scene was a tableau I could never have imagined. My parents, stiff and furious, on one side of the polished mahogany table, Ethan beside them, though maintaining a careful, physical distance, Aunt Diana next to me, a pillar of quiet strength. And at the head of the table, presiding over her neat stacks of folders, sat my 16-year-old daughter, Maya. Before we begin, my father announced, his voice retaining its imperious tone, I want to register my formal objection to Diana's presence. This is a private family matter. Diana is my family, I replied simply. And her history with your financial tactics is directly relevant to this discussion. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. I simply don't understand how it has come to this. We only ever wanted what was best for Nico and for the family's legacy. By cutting out his sister and stealing my inheritance? I challenged. By telling my son I was an unfit mother? My mother began. Rebecca cut her off by placing a small digital audio recorder on the table. Perhaps we should review the documented evidence before we proceed with further denials, she suggested mildly. What followed was not a shouting match, but a calm, methodical dismantling of my father's plan. Rebecca presented the case we had built, piece by damning piece, the emails, the drafts of legal documents, the timeline of manipulative conversations with Nico, the audio recordings from the party. My father's face grew stonier with each revelation, especially when Rebecca outlined the potential legal exposure, not just a civil suit, but possible sanctions for breach of fiduciary duty in his role as family trustee. What? My father finally bit out, his voice seething. Do you want Isabel? Rebecca slid a document across the table. Our terms are quite straightforward. First, a legally binding agreement that all inherited assets previously designated for Isabel remain under her sole and irrevocable control. My father started to protest, but his own lawyer laid a restraining hand on his arm. Second, a formal restructuring of the family trust to name both Maya and Nico as equal beneficiaries, with a neutral third-party financial institution appointed as trustee, replacing Mr. Sterling. My mother gasped audibly. It was, effectively, the end of his financial reign. And third, Rebecca concluded, a structured communication plan for grandparental visitation, to begin with professionally supervised sessions until a baseline of trust and respectful conduct can be established. That is insulting, my father sputtered. We do not need to be supervised to see our own grandson. The recordings of you actively undermining Ms. Rossi's parental authority suggest otherwise, Rebecca replied coolly. The negotiations dragged on for hours. But by late afternoon, a settlement was signed, one that secured my future, protected my children equally, and erected firm, clear boundaries around my parents' involvement in our lives. As we gathered our things to leave, my father made one last attempt to reclaim his power. I hope you're satisfied, Isabel. This vendetta has fractured this family beyond repair. Maya, who had been a model of quiet composure, finally spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it filled the room. With all due respect, Grandpa, she said, looking him directly in the eye, you fractured this family when you decided Mom and I were disposable. We're just holding you accountable for it. The simple, unassailable truth of her words hung in the air as we walked out, leaving my parents to sit with the wreckage of their own making. The year that followed was one of quiet reconstruction. With my financial future secure, I bought a small but charming craftsman bungalow with a large yard perfect for my design experiments. I took over full management of a local nursery and landscape design center, finding a creative and professional fulfillment I had long suppressed. Maya, free from the toxic family dynamics, blossomed, developing a close bond with Diana and the cousins she barely knew. Nico, no longer a pawn in a game he didn't understand, became a happier, more relaxed kid. My relationship with my parents is a slow, careful work in progress. The supervised visits eventually gave way to cautious, unstructured time, but the rules of engagement are new and non-negotiable. They are learning, grudgingly, that their access to my children is a privilege dependent on their respect for me as a parent. One cool evening, a year to the day after the party, Maya and I sat on the porch of our new home, watching the sky fade from pink to indigo. Do you think they'll ever really change? She asked. I thought for a moment. People rarely change at their core, I said. But they can learn to change their behavior, especially when the old behavior no longer works. I looked at her, my heart swelling with a love so profound it almost hurt. We wouldn't be here, in this house, like this, if it weren't for you. You saw the truth, and you weren't afraid of it. You saved us, Maya. She smiled, a little embarrassed. I just paid attention, Mom. And that, I said, squeezing her hand, is the one thing they never counted on. We sat in comfortable silence, the crickets beginning their nightly chorus. The greatest lesson in this painful journey was not about money or property. It was about learning to trust my own perceptions, and more importantly, to trust the perceptions of those who truly love me. For years, I had measured my worth by my parents' approval. Now, I measured it by the quiet integrity of my life, the resilience of my children, and the fierce, protective love of a daughter who had shown me what true family looks like. Looking at Maya, perceptive, principled, and braver than she would ever know, I knew the only legacy that truly mattered was already flourishing.